Is mine working?
Yeah.
Huzzah! Hello! Hi. Welcome to St. Warehouse. Welcome to the Voices on Talkback session, post Labapalooza Program B.
Nice.
My name is Chrissy Smith. I'm the company manager for St. Anne's Warehouse. I'm also a co-lab director for the Labapalooza Festival with Matt Atchison, to my right, in the dapper green suit. So I think pretty quickly, because we have so many people on stage, I'd like to do a quick sort of run through of who everybody is. It will take a minute because there's a lot of us, but I'm just going to pass the mic around and you guys can say who you are and what project you're working on.
My name is Jamie, and I was part of Chimpanzee.
My name is Kate, and I was the sound designer for Chimpanzee.
My name is Jerome McGee, and I was part of Chimpanzee by Nick Lehane.
Tristan, part of Chimpanzee.
I'm Michael. I'm doing my solo performance tonight, Program A.
I'm Nick Lehane, and this is Lab. And I made Chimpanzee with these guys.
And I'm Chrissy Smith, company manager for St. Anne's.
Andy, and I worked on Before and After.
David Commander, I did Essex.
I'm Andrew Livingston, and I co-created and did the music and sound design for Point Pleasant program A.
I'm Robin, and I made the Fitzcarraldo Ronaldo videos.
My name is Randy, and I made Boris the Peacock.
My name is Lindsay Lynch, and I created Before and After with these two ladies and directed.
My name is Yulia, and I worked on Before and After.
And Misty and I also worked on Before and After.
I'm Carson, and I also worked on Before and After.
I'm Daniel, Before and After.
I'm Ben, and I did sound design for Before and After.
Okay, so I think first I'd like to just talk a little bit about the lab and give sort of a basic introduction as to what it is. And I think I'll do that through asking Matt some questions.
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
what is the lab? How does one apply to the lab? And what is the application process like for the lab?
Very excellent questions. The lab is a this is the festival. The lab is an 8-month process. It usually begins in the fall, sometime around October. And if you're interested in applying, you should check the St. Anne's Warehouse around September. And the application process is relatively simple. We like to bring together people from various different backgrounds, so if you've never touched a puppet before in your life, you're more than welcome and actually encouraged to participate. And then we like to mix that with people who've touched puppets a lot. And then, so it's basically, we like to have people who are usually out of school, have done some performance or publishing or some sort of had their work, whatever that is, be it writing or science or a doctor, I don't know. Some work in the field that you have found yourself in. And then we love to just hear kind of an idea of what you're thinking about, why you'd like to tackle puppetry, what your thoughts are or experiences are regarding the lab. And then Christy and I sit down with a couple other people and we kind of go through all the applications and try to put a wonderful evening together. And for us, the most important thing, the festival is a lot of fun and it's a great time, but for us, the most important thing is the process leading up to that. And that we kind of create and bring these people together into a room and create a little network for them and a little community for them. They push each other into places they never expected that they would. They support each other in great, very surprising ways and kind of develop an artistic support unit for each other, which I think is really valuable and really important, especially in this crazy city that we're all trying to make work in. And then we have this festival at the end, which is a whole lot of fun, and thank you all for coming.
Great, thank you. I guess I want to sort of speak to that as well in terms of, we do really try every year when we go through the applications, we try very hard to create a group of participants that complement each other. So there's varying levels of skill sets and some people who have worked in the medium a lot, some people who've never dabbled in it at all. We love that sort of a mix because it not only is it helpful for the people who are inexperienced with puppetry, they learn a ton, of course, but also I think those who have been working in the field for a long time get to hear some fresh perspectives and some points of view from people who aren't particularly well versed in the medium yet. My next question, I think, is would you talk a little bit about the lab sessions and what happens there?
So, every Monday night, starting around 7 o'clock on the dot, we all get together and meet here at the warehouse. Sometimes if it's busy here, we meet at a bar. But we get together and the whole point of it is for people to present their ideas, to present their work, to present where they are. And we encourage people to show as often as possible. We usually try to only do like 3 or 4 groups, so we're not here until 1 in the morning. But basically those showings are, I've built this arm and I don't know how to finish it, or I can't get the elbow to bend, or I have this scene that I thought up and this is how it goes, does it make sense? And we kind of structured in a way that whoever is showing, whoever is presented, kind of leads the conversation. And part of the presenting is that you come armed with a bunch of questions. And our responsibility is to honestly and singularly answer those questions, not as saying, I don't think the audience would understand it, or I don't like it because it's yellow, but really kind of answering honestly the questions that the artists are all asking. And we kind of become very vulnerable to each other and very trusting of each other because of that. And I think it kind of gives a place for people to go where they might not have gone if they were trying to figure this stuff out on their own. So it's very much artist-driven, and I think Chrissy and I are here to just kind of facilitate conversations and keep them kind of open and not, I can't even think of the word because I don't really facilitate very well. But, and for us, I think Chrissy and I, we really kind of stand up and kind of come in towards the end of the process when things are a little bit more out of the notebooks and on the stage and in 3 dimension. And we try to create deadlines throughout the process too, where halfway through, you gotta get out of your notebook. You gotta get something in 3D form that you can move around, because the amazing thing with puppets is that they take forever, and once you built them, they don't do anything you thought they would do. So it's about trying to pace it out so you have time to still explore, but you're also creating at the same time and still have time to rehearse what you have made at the last bit of the festival. I'm going to stop talking.
Okay, thank you. Great. So I agree with everything you said. I think that the lab is a really process-oriented experience. We tend not to, or I always try for the longest time throughout the lab sessions to not lay anything onto the artist in terms of, well, how is that going to work in terms of performance, and I try to sort of keep those conversations until the very end, until we're actually building a festival and putting something in front of the audience. Most of the lab sessions, it's about really letting people dream and experiment and question and be curious, and that's what we want to encourage. We also encourage, I think, although we accept the participants mainly, like I said, not based on their resumes, but mainly on their project ideas and whether or not we think that it's an exciting project that has enough meat to it that they can work on it for 8 months, but also that it's sort of still loose in their minds, so that it will grow and change and they're not too sort of set in their minds about what it's going to be. I think that's also sort of a very important thing because we really want to focus on the process, and we like it when stuff changes throughout the course of the year. Anyway, with all of that, so that's your basic introduction. That's where we've all been for the past 8 months inside our little heads. And so now I'm going to open it up, I think, to you guys, the audience, and see if you have any questions for the people here up on stage. You've got everybody who participated in the program that you just saw, and then you also have some artists that will be performing tonight in programming. So does anybody have any questions? Just raise your hands. Yes, ma'am.
I like puppets, but I guess my question in general is why puppets? Like what brings different people to puppets?
Does anybody up here want to answer that? Oh, actually, thank you, Eric. I'm going to repeat the question. I've been told that otherwise the film won't pick it up either. She wants to know why puppets. What brings people to puppetry and to puppets in general? And I feel like Robin is looking at me like maybe she has the same answer.
I'm new to puppetry entirely, but what draws me to it is that I think it really requires a lot of the audience in terms of imagination, and to me that's really exciting, and there's a lot of room for interpretation, but also it's super active in that it requires you to personalize it and to create your own world out of it. So I think for me that was what was really different coming out of straight theater into this, and how Matt taught us where like the simplest moves read multitudes. And also I read somewhere once that puppetry taps into the animal part of your brain, and I think that's true as well. I think you empathize with it in a way that is very sort of almost subconscious and emotional. But anyway, that's what I think
Yeah, I guess I would say I'd have to agree with Lacey that it does require a lot of the audience to like fill in the gaps in order for you to believe it, and I think you engage the audience on a different level because of that. They're not just having to buy the story the actors are telling, they're like having to buy that this thing's alive, and once your brain is working like that, then you're engaged on a totally different level.
Next question. Yes, sir?
The choreography in achieving chimpanzee, what kind of time do you folks have to invest to achieve that?
So to repeat the question, the gentleman is curious about what sort of time, the time that it took to achieve the choreography that was involved in the piece Chimpanzee, directed by Nick to my left. So he's going to start answering that one.
I'm going to stall while Rowan actually finds the actual number. Yeah, this is my first time directing something, and I found out that I probably need a stage manager so that I can answer questions like, how many hours did we spend? We were rehearsing for like 2 months, but mostly like 2 days a week because I was out of town. And it required a lot more time than I'm used to doing mostly straight theater. I've heard the rule, there's like you have to rehearse an hour for a minute of comedy, of like farce, and this was more than that. Yeah.
We spent a lot of time getting used to how we can communicate, and so a lot of our time was spent just exploring before the choreography actually was set. This choreography got set much later in the process. The majority of the time, I think, was spent exploring and improvising movements. Just walking around. The first handful of rehearsals were just us walking and breathing. What does it look like? How does this breathe? And when you are doing puppetry, especially something like Bunroku style puppetry, when you're hands-on, you have a direct connection to the puppet. You have to figure out how this particular puppet works. And so we spent time figuring out what's the difference between how a chimpanzee actually moves and how does this puppet chimpanzee move. And what's the reality of that?
So it's between 30 and 35 hours. And when Tristan says that the first handful of rehearsals were just walking around, that's about 9 hours, 10 hours, which you spent without making much choreography other than walking this way and that. Before the piece was set. And then there was, several hours, I suppose, when we were just running it, but about 35 hours to make 15 minutes of like what a chimp breathes like on a table.
Yes.
Just more about chimpanzee. Like, if it took 2 months of rehearsal, what were the other 6 months of lab?
So the question is, 2 months of rehearsal, what were you doing for the rest of the lab?
Just like twiddling my thumbs, I guess. I spent, that's a great question. Yeah, I was building Puppet for part of it, and then there was like rehearsing with the mock-up before that, when I was puppeteering and then decided not to. I was researching. I read this great book called The Evolution of Bruno Littlemore by another Sarah Lawrence grad. I'm not. They are. Which is a fictionalization of a cross-foster chimpanzee who becomes a human being. And this excellent book called My Conversations with Chimpanzees, which is a non-fictional account that most of this draws from. And coming up with designs that were too complicated and unnecessary, like how to make fingers that can like do everything, and like long, lengthy conversations about what that would look like, only to realize that I was going to settle on something a lot simpler that hopefully would activate the audience's imagination more. Yeah.
Next question. Yes.
This is for President of Essex. So why do you decide to show yourself on stage rather than hide backstage additional process?
So the question is for David Commander, who created Essex, the first piece you saw tonight. She's asking why show the video and then also all the sort of live manipulation that goes into producing the video feed.
That's impossible. I was running an invisible sign. I think it's a spectacle that makes it a live performance. Otherwise, I could just pre-shoot the video and show it as a film. Part of the spectacle of what I want to do as performance is you get to see me struggle and sweat and cry on the inside. And I think that's a lot of why people go to the theater, to see struggle and failure.
Next question. I also want to welcome all of our past labbers, of which there are at least a dozen in the audience right now. And I want to say welcome back. It's nice to see your faces. So I think we have time for a few more, if there's any more. Yes?
I'd like to know, the people who did not come from a puppetry background, how many in the past go on to continue with that involvement?
Well, I think that's tricky for those people who are on stage because they're still sort of in the thick of it, but actually that could be something that maybe Liz would for that. The question is how many people participate in the lab here at St. Anne's who haven't done puppetry before? How many of them go on to continue working with puppetry?
One project-oriented program, or is it something that's a seed for a future?
Oh, go ahead.
I feel that let me start over. in my experience. I've noticed that people leave this community or leave this process with the community, and regardless of whatever artistic endeavor they pursue, there's a communication and a level of trust in the feedback and how the 8 months have kind of culminated that the art form almost is secondary and the process is still number one. And I think that these guys, hopefully, my goal is that these people leave with this kind of support community. And I know that several years ago there was a lab and they still meet every now and again and they still bounce ideas around with each other. And some have gone off into other venues and some have also stayed with puppetry. I've also several people who've come in as neuroscientists. I think Tom's still here. I'm not sure. Yes, there you are. I know that some people have admitted to me that once they got a taste of puppetry, it's hard to shake it, and they're still pursuing it and still loving it. I think it's just a very special experience, and I think there's skills and exercises that we talk about that can be applied to any art form, and also just daily life, just in terms of how to get through and how to get your ideas out of your head and into the world. So I would say everybody continues with puppetry in some form after this process.
And I would say that, as far as I know, almost every puppet lab that I've worked on, this is my third, at least one participant goes on to receive a grant based on the work as it's developed here. They have a lovely 20-minute piece of work, and we photograph it, we film it, and that's just a great sort of launch pad for them to go on and look for grant money. Robin, for example, participated in the lab 2 years ago with a piece that she went on to create a much fuller, she did a 20-minute sort of workshop of it here, and then she went on to create a much fuller, longer evening performance, really fleshing it all out. But she did the sort of basic bone structure here of creating a central character and kind of figuring out what the basic conflict of the piece is going to be about. And then went on, also Z, did a piece here 2 years ago, which went on, had several manifestations all around New York. I mean, people, their projects stay alive for quite a while. And I also wanted to say about Point Pleasant, Mothman, that actually already has a life beyond the Puppet Lab because it's going to be performed at the Mothman Festival in Virginia in September. So if you want to check out that piece that's performing this evening, and it's based on the Mothman sightings in Point Pleasant, Virginia in the early 60s, and apparently that town, Point Pleasant, has a Mothman Festival every fall, and so they're going to go and show their piece there. I think, let's do one more. Yes?
I was just curious about how before and after began, as what idea you pitched and how it changed and what's the
Okay, so the question is for before and after. He's curious about how the piece began and how it changed throughout the course of the lab.
Entirely. But I think, not even the same thing, but I think that for us, that this was part of the process of learning, is that we kept talking about things, and talking about things, and talking about things, and talking about things. And when we finally put the objects together, the story started to tell itself totally differently anyways. So we probably should have stopped talking a little bit earlier. That was a lesson learned. But we pitched an idea about a man with microscopic sight who lives in the near future, who sees everything that we overlook. And it was kind of the idea of like that 7th grade science feeling you have when you can see things in a microscope for the first time, and you know that pond water is alive, or that there are dust mites on your eyes, and that's where all that came from. And pretty much the only part of that stayed was the dust mites in your eyes, which became dust mites in his room. So, somehow that, to wrap it up, somehow that transformed into kind of this hoarder character who's stuck in his own mind and this other world. But yeah, the only part that stayed the same was the mite. Right?
I think to sort of defend the connection between the current project and how it started, I mean, it's super, super different. I think the link was that we became interested in what a version of that story would be that wasn't science fiction. like what kind of person would examine something too closely. And that grew into this idea of someone like stuck in a loop of a single experience that he was just reliving and re-experiencing and seeing too closely, I think.
Yeah. That's what we said.
Great. So I think at this point I'm going to ask if anybody up here has anything that they just want to say. We'll do sort of a couple closing statements, but if any of you guys have anything you'd like to sort of share about your experience this year or encourage people to apply or tell their friends to apply, anything?
Great.
Apply and tell your friends to apply.
Oh, no.
Apply even if you don't know what your idea is. Yeah.
And I think, yeah, with that, Matt, anything else?
Thank you all very much.
Yeah, thank you very much.